All right, hi everyone. This is Amanì Michael, and today I was hoping to hold some space through Into It Hugh to talk about some recent events, and particularly around Charlottesville, Virginia, and explore some questions around what the black body is and how it's understood as a political, social, and personal construct. So, before we jump in too much, I'm going to make sure. I'm just going to take a second and make sure that we get the link out. It's going to post that real fast. If I can figure out where it is. Okay, just found it. All right. So we're just going to give people a second to enter the room space, and I'm going to post it on Facebook just to make sure everyone can see. And let's post that. Let's see. So this is my first time using YouTube Live to record, and using broadcasting software and everything, so I'm trying to make sure I get it all set up well. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So let's make sure we can see everything. All right, so yeah, as I mentioned before, my name is Amanì Michael. I'm speaking with Into It Hugh today and trying to hold space to talk about the black body as a political, social, and personal construct. So this is going to be a two-part series today, and we'll be holding space in the coming months, I'm sure, to come back and revisit this question, which will be titled "A Black Body Is." So this is a conversation that I'm hoping to hold over many months to continue to revisit, and today, as I mentioned, we'll just start with two parts. So if you are joining, just making sure that the live chat is visible. So yeah, feel free to join in the YouTube link, which I guess you must have seen it already by now. But if you are connected to me on Facebook, then feel free to send in questions as we're talking, to send in any thoughts that you might have or things that you'd like to look at. I do have a structure for today, as I mentioned, in two parts. The first is going to be called Observing, and the second part is going to be called Dreaming. So feel free to join me in either part. I'm going to suggest that let's see. So one thing that I think we forget to do a lot of times is to allow ourselves space to not engage events that are very demanding of our energies, very demanding of our presence, to not feel like we have to have answers and respond immediately to everything. So I'm going to encourage anyone who identifies as Black or Indigenous to maybe just join in the second part of this conversation. So I'm going to take some time and move through the first part of the conversation, and then move into take a small break and then move into the second part. And I would suggest that if you identify as Black or Indigenous, maybe take some space to engage this at another time, or to engage this first part. That's what I'm referring to. Engage the first part at another time and join us in the second part, or maybe just take some time to practice more self-care right now and not feel overwhelmed with all of this. So I'm just going to leave that choice up to you. Let me just confirm that this is getting out. Yeah. Okay. It's always a little bit tough getting these conversations started because I have so many thoughts coming through, but we're just gonna move through and see what comes up. And please, again, if you're involved in the live chat, that really helps me know how to move forward and know how to structure the conversation. But yeah, so just to begin, I'm going to give a content note. We are going to be talking a lot about policing. We're going to be talking a lot about structural and personal violences. We're going to talk about prejudices. We're going to talk about racism. We're going to talk about Charlottesville, Virginia. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the violences that we've been seeing coming before and after Trump's inauguration, and how that conversation has been structured. So for anyone watching, just to make sure that you understand that a lot of these topics, particularly in the first part of this conversation, less so in the second, some of these conversations may be very triggering for some of us. So I just want everyone to feel that they can engage mindfully and not feel overwhelmed in any particular way. So yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to start with part 1, take a break, and move into part 2. So to explain a little bit about what I mean by a Black body is, I was thinking about how to approach this conversation, how to approach the conversation of others having conversations around what my body means. A lot of people don't know that's the conversation that they're having. A lot of people do feel that that's the conversation they're having. And I'm witnessing a lot of violence in that conversation. But what I continue to see over and over again is the Black body being used as a point of negotiation for every individual involved that I see, not only Black individuals, but also white folks, also different people of color, engaging in these conversations and using the Black body as a point of focus and a point of negotiation and a point of navigation for their own experiences. So I'm interested in exploring in this series, and again, there will be many videos. I'm interested in exploring exactly what goes on in that negotiation. What is the Black body used to accomplish, and what can it mean? That's the kind of question that I'm asking. So to start off, I wanted to open this conversation with observing. So if you see the title right now, the conversation is "A Black Body is Observing." And that's also why I've invited Black and Indigenous folks to step away from the space and not engage so deeply, because we've been observing. And a lot of the things that I'm seeing are not shocking to me. They're not surprising. They are not particularly interesting. They are not novel. There's nothing new about this experience to me. And so I think what I'm saying is Black folks have already known this for a long time. We've collectively understood a lot of these systematic violences that we've been experiencing. We've understood how we're responding to them, how to engage our own identities, and through the challenges of constantly being tested and constantly being used as a commodity for negotiation. We've been in a position to observe constantly. So I think I want to hold this first space in a Black Body Is as a discussion of the things that we're observing, and just to check in with some of the things that I'm literally just seeing. And from there, I want to move into the second part. I'm not going to name the second part yet. I think I've already mentioned what I've titled it. But I think before anything, I have to be able to observe the world around me. And I think that I'm observing a lot of things that others are missing for various reasons. For being overwhelmed emotionally and mentally, for having privileges that may limit their ability to engage certain questions. We're all engaging from different places, so I just want to really check in with some of the things that I'm observing first of all. I have a couple of messages here. Awesome. Thank you to everyone who is confirming the audio and everything, because this is my first time recording using OBS, so I really appreciate everyone letting me know that this is so there's a lag between audio and video. I don't know if that will be the case when it actually uploads, but minimally, if it's too upsetting that they're off, you can just turn the video away and listen to the audio or whatever makes sense to you. But thank you to everyone letting me know that, and we will look into how to approach those issues in the future. We'll figure it out. Okay. So, yeah. What am I saying? What I'm saying in the world right now is that these recent events are not exceptional. And I made a post about this already, speaking to how so many of the white folks that I'm engaged with in my personal circle are responding to this as if it is like to be unexpected. And that's really shocking to me, not because I expect anyone to share my experience, but because it shows me how distinct our perception of certain systems are. And yeah, I'm just reflecting. There's so many places I'm saying this, but I've noted a few. I've taken some notes, and there's some things that I want to share here. So obviously the first part of what we're talking about right now that's sparking a lot of these conversations is Charlottesville, Virginia. And there are a number of things I want to say about this space, and I encourage, just checking my phone to make sure those questions. If you have something that you want to share, please share it in the chat and allow us to, it's really helpful to be able to engage these questions, and I'm also holding space to answer some things that maybe are insensitive, maybe are misguided, maybe are a little bit hurtful. I'm holding space to respond to some of those things right now, particularly in this first part, observing. In the second part, I'm going to be more focusing on centering Black and Indigenous experience and healing processes with that, but we'll get to that when we get there. What I'm saying is right now is an exceptional time to ask questions and to put your thoughts here, regardless of your identity or privilege or experience. So feel free to share that here. Okay, so there are a number of things that I'm noticing right now and that I've been noticing in the past months that are just not exceptional, but which I keep seeing sensationalized and mentioned countless times over and over and over again, that really are just not interesting or shocking to me. And the events in Charlottesville, I've been watching different YouTube videos, I've been reading different articles, I've been paying attention to how people in my personal circles and beyond have been talking about these things, and again, nothing I'm seeing is exceptional. And I'm really thankful for the people who are speaking on this in the way of sharing how it's not exceptional. Maybe I should define what I mean by exceptional. What I mean by exceptional is that it is precisely not an exception. It's not an exception to the rule. It's not an exception in the system. It's not an isolated event. It's not unexpected. It's not a particular like accident. There's nothing accidental about what's happening. And then also exceptional, like it's just really not that interesting. It's really not that interesting. I see a lot of people investing a great amount of time into deconstructing the Charlottesville events right now. The fact is that those are events. Those are events, and the nature of events is that we only mark the big events, but that's not actually where the violences are most happening. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to share some different posts that I've been reading. I wonder if I can just type them in the chat here and allow us to deconstruct those together so that you can work along with me. Let's see if this works here. Yes, awesome. So if you're seeing that, I just posted in the live chat, and again, I'll post these in the description below the video once it's up and everything. But if you can see this link, go ahead and click on that and we'll look at it together. Make sure which one it is. So yeah, so this article is titled White Feelings, 0 to 60 for Charlottesville. I'm also going to be censoring any language that can be perceived as cursing or swearing, not because I have a problem with it, but because I want to make sure that these videos are made available on YouTube, Facebook, and everything. So just to not have any problems with community guidelines and such. So I'll be censoring any of that language for that particular purpose. Also, as you're watching, please, if you're watching live, please let me know if the audio is syncing up with the video, like if there's any major change like that, if there's a drop in audio. I'm particularly concerned with the audio more than the video, so just to let me know what it looks like for you. Okay, so I'm looking at the aaronbrook.com article titled White Feelings, 0 to 60 for Charlottesville. And what this appears to be is a list of, I'll let them explain it. So it says Charlottesville is an effing mess. So here it is, your 0 to 60 speed run through your white feelings to get you on board in no particular order. So the first thing about this is 0 to 60 when you're talking about speed isn't an order. And I feel that this kind of does fall in it kind of does fall in an order of how people respond most often. These are a lot of the responses that I'm seeing from white identified folks and from others. So yeah, the first one, let's just look at a couple of these together. So even if you're watching this not live and you're watching the recorded version of this, you can definitely check out the article and follow along. So number one in white feelings is, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This is the most common sentiment that I see. Number two, oh my God, this is just so awful. 3, I can't believe this is real. 4, how did this happen? You see, we all recognize that there are certain patterns of how people are talking about these questions, about how people are responding, the types of responses that we're seeing the most. And the thing is that they are, what they're telling us about these events is that there's something special about them, that there's something particularly awful, that there's something unrealistic about this actually happening. It's surreal, that we don't know how it got to this, and that we can't believe this is happening. Those are all lies. These are lies. These are not lies in the sense of personal, like, I'm sure when people say these things, they really believe them. The thing is, if you check in historically, it's not the case. We do know that this is real. We do know that things that we perceive as more awful have been happening. We do know how this happened. There's been historical patterns, and I'm going to lay out some of these. But I'm mentioning, we know how this happened. We do believe it. We know that it's real, and we know that it's awful, and we know that it's going to continue to happen until we rework it. That's the thing. And so this is where I'm starting, is seeing articles like this, compiling the types of responses that I'm seeing from white folks and from others in my personal connections and beyond that. And it's not interesting. This is the same type of thing. This is the same type of thing when we see a bomb attack in Paris, when we see, I don't know, when I engage in vegan advocacy, and then I'm talking about some of the things that are happening regarding cows and the violation of bodily rights there, and autonomy and motherhood and the separation of children. And people are like, okay, but it's food. But then they look at like a dog who's been left in a car, or a dog who's been left on the street, or been tied up for a day or two, and we hear the same things. Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Oh my God, this is just so awful. I can't believe this is real. How did this happen? This is absurd. I'm angry. These are the types of things that this article continues to list. And it's not new. It's not new. There's something very commodifying about these responses, and that's what I'm hoping to ask you about. If you're looking for a point here, if you're like, what point is Amanì trying to make? I'm not trying to make a point right now. What I'm trying to do is hold space for a question. And as I mentioned, I'm asking the question of what a black body is. And I'm asking, how is it a political, a social, a personal construct? That's what I'm asking. I'm asking questions. And in this section titled Observing, a black body is observing, I'm asking, what are we learning from recent events? What are we learning? Like, what are we actually learning? Because I look around and I see people talking about these things, and I see these responses, and then I see articles about these responses, and then I see people deconstructing the articles about the responses, and then I see people mocking the deconstruction. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a cycle of the same things. Everyone falls into these layers, but I don't see meaningful, compelling change. And I do have some suspicions as to why. But what I'm asking is, what are we learning? What are we learning from all this? I'm going to check the chat. Okay, the YouTube, it's not. So the audio is perfect, but simply lagging. That's totally fine with me for this first time. It may just be an internet connection problem, maybe a rendering or decoding problem, I don't really know. But as long as the audio is solid. So yeah, I don't really know this, and I think that's really important to say. I, existing in my black body, do not know what we're supposed to take away from this. I'm asking a lot of the same questions that others are asking. I'm asking, what do I do with all this information? And here I'm just asking, what are we learning? One thing that I found interesting about this article, the same White Feelings article, 0 to 60, after these, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is so awful, how did this happen, that kind of thing, we see other things like, oh my God, I feel so guilty, where someone is centering themselves. Why can't we just get along? Where people, you know, I don't see, I think I heard, is it Trump making this commentary? We're all Americans first. We're all Americans first. I'm not even going to get into that yet. These are just things that I hear people saying. How can we come together? I'm praying for the people in Charlottesville. Let's go down to 60. So the reason why I also saw this as a progression and not like, as the author said, just like in no particular order, is because this is, one, because 0 to 60 is the speed, and it is in order, but the person also organized this in this sort of order. If you look at number 60, it says, I've also seen this on my Facebook. It says, F you, Nazi scum. 59 is, no, I mean, really angry. 58 is, I'm angry about this. 57 is, this isn't America. I do feel that this is a progression from where we start. We start by saying things like, I can't believe this. This is so awful, I can't believe this is real, how is this happening? And then we do end up right back at, this isn't the America I know, and I'm angry, and if I'm going to be angry, I'm going to direct it at these Nazis. The thing that both parts of this don't realize is that it's actually a circle. It's actually a circle. You've not really gone anywhere, because in both situations, what I'm observing, what I'm seeing here, what I'm learning from recent events is that we can always other. We can always create an other. We can always say, that person is a Nazi, I'm not. That person is committing violence, I'm not. That person is racist, I'm not. That person is exceptional, I'm not. Do you hear what I'm saying? This pattern is constant. And in all of these responses, pretty much all of them, 0 through 60, there's no accountability. There is apology. There's not accountability. There's I'm sorry. There's I wish this weren't happening. There's this is horrible and I can't believe that you have to go through this. There's how can someone be so hateful? But there's not accountability. So I think what was really interesting to me about this article, and maybe for those of you viewing now or later, you can take some time and reflect on these responses. The article also proposes some sort of like responses back to these pieces of commentary. So maybe like some solutions or some just commentary back. So maybe you can engage that. But I just found this really interesting and insightful as just sort of to encapsulate all of the types of responses that I'm seeing, and how in 60 diverse or 60 distinct responses, somehow there still manages to be no accountability. And I think that's where I'm at right now in this process, as I witness a lot of these events again, and as I witness the non-events that happen every day, the smaller events, the details in between. I don't see accountability. I don't see a novel story. I don't see anything exceptional, and I'm looking for something exceptional. If you look at, let me check the chat just to be sure. Okay. Trying to keep this open. I have so many windows, I have to get this nicely organized for next time. So again, there's the next thing. Again, there I'm going to mention a content note here. I am going to be talking about policing, physical violence, brutality, systemic abuse. So if you are just tuning in and you're seeing this, or you're watching this part of the video, feel free to skip ahead. I would not be showing in this video, or the second part, any sort of imagery. The only imagery will just be of my face and this nice little moth in the corner. I will not be showing the imagery, particularly because it is overly abundant, and I do not feel that it serves Black or Indigenous folks to see this over and over, to see our bodies being engaged in that way. That's not what I'm using this space for. But I do want to deconstruct some of what I'm witnessing. So I will be talking about policing, brutality, systemic violences. So if you want to check out now, feel free to do so. So that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing Charlottesville, and I'm thinking not exceptional. I'm seeing police brutality, and I'm thinking not exceptional. I'm seeing Trump, and I'm thinking not exceptional. I'm seeing people being upset about Trump being in office, and I'm thinking not exceptional. I'm seeing racist attacks in Walmart, and I'm thinking not exceptional. This is what I keep going back to, and I think we're all aware of this. I'm going to bring up some points here. I was watching a video earlier today where Trump. These quotes are golden, honestly. These quotes are abundant, and I just pulled one out of a video that I was watching. Trump said, "We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides." Again, you do not have to be a linguist to deconstruct what people are saying. What has Trump actually said here? Let's look at this simple syntactic structure. We condemn. Let's take out in the strongest possible terms. It's not contributing a ton. We condemn this egregious display. If you stop and look at that, you hear what is not said is we condemn this egregious hatred, bigotry, and violence. I might have some problems with that. I might deconstruct that further. But what I'm saying is that's not what was said. And when we're engaging in this media, I feel like a lot of times we hear these things, and what we're hearing is, obviously we condemn the hatred, the bigotry, and the violence. That's not what was said. That is precisely not what was communicated. What was communicated is we condemn this egregious display. It's the display that we're condemning of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. And I found another quote from the mayor, Michael Signer, of Charlottesville, Virginia, saying, "I am beyond disgusted by this unsanctioned and despicable display of visual intimidation on a college campus." Again, what are we disgusted by? The display. I am beyond disgusted by this unsanctioned and despicable display of visual intimidation on a college campus. What we're upset about is not that it exists. We're upset that we're seeing it. Do you see the difference? In both of these accounts, I didn't spend, you may think, oh, well, maybe Amanì just went through all these articles and just like handpicked different things to support this thought. I'm observing, that's what I'm doing. And I am interested in what story is being told, but I'm not invested in understanding my body being used in these ways and being understood in these ways and these events being understood in these ways. I'm asking, how are they being constructed? And when I engage in media, what I see people saying is, we condemn this display. I am disgusted by this display. And I really believe that people will tell you about themselves and the things. The language is a beautiful and powerful thing. We use it to tell others about how we position ourselves and them in the world. What we think is important to share, what we think is most notable, what we think is ideal, what we dream about. That's what we use language for. And what I'm observing here is that what we most condemn, Trump had millions of words to choose from. Trump had millions of words to choose from. So did the mayor. And in both accounts, two of the people who are most speaking on these events right now, or not who are most speaking, but who are most being looked to regarding these events right now, both people have said that they're upset with the display. The mayor even went as far as to say, let's revisit the quote. I am beyond disgusted by this unsanctioned and despicable display of visual intimidation on a college campus. So the mayor even went as far to say it's unsanctioned. It's unsanctioned. That's false. It is sanctioned, actually, because it's not been stopped. It is being endorsed. The police forces are supposed to be, they describe themselves as people who protect and serve. And here they're doing a great job of protecting and serving these individuals by not showing up in riot gear when these things are first happening, by not doing the things that they do to absolutely tear apart black and brown bodies. That's what they're not. That's what they're not doing. This is actually, if we understand it, if we look at it in context, it is actually a sanctioned display. This is very much a sanctioned display. It's a governmentally endorsed display. And that's confusing, right? That's very confusing when we observe that. How can someone say, I hate this display, but I'm also sanctioning it, but I also am not sanctioning it? That's very confusing. But it's not confusing if we understand more about the stories that we're telling. So just to look at these again, I'm just going to repeat the one from Trump. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. And from the mayor, I am beyond disgusted by this unsanctioned and despicable display of visual intimidation on a college campus. That second quote in particular, there are so many conditions. It's despicable, it's unsanctioned. You know, what if it were less despicable? What if it were more approachable, and a more approachable display of visual intimidation on a college campus? What if it were not on a college campus? What if it were not visual? What if it were sanctioned or not sanctioned? You know, there's so many conditions to how we can be disgusted. We only want to be disgusted in very specific ways, and I think yeah, just what I observed from that is a lack of accountability. We don't want to be accountable for the hatred, bigotry, and violence. We want to be upset. We want to be upset at very specific displays of it. We don't want to see it. We already know it exists, but we don't want to see it. We don't want it to be displayed. I'm going to check the chat again real fast. Okay. I have another quote here from John McCain, which says, white supremacists aren't patriots, they're traitors. Americans must unite against hatred and bigotry. Another thing that's interesting about this language is how it's using the same types of words. We talk about disgust, we talk about, well, I've already mentioned display, it comes up over and over and over again. But we talk about hatred, we talk about bigotry, we talk about violence, we talk about disgusting and despicable, and how we respond to that is we have to unite. We're all together. But the thing is, John McCain is saying white supremacists aren't patriots, they're traitors. First of all, what's embedded in that statement is the idea that John McCain must not be a white supremacist. Right? You're using R as somebody else. White supremacists are this, they're traitors. So we have the idea that we're not white supremacists ourselves, that we're not invested in systems of white supremacy, that we're not invested in systems which endlessly prioritize white interests and white needs and white perspectives and white investments. That's what we're investing ourselves in. So actually, I am of the understanding that I identify with white supremacy, because if I didn't, then I would have divested already in a number of ways. But if I look structurally, at the systems that I participate in life, if I look at the fact that I identify as a U.S. citizen, for better or for worse, if I look at the fact that when a police officer, a thief, a bandit approaches me, then I respond with fear and affirming that they have some sort of power over me. I'm invested in white supremacy. And we don't want to say that. We don't want to hear that. That sounds horrible. We don't want to hear ourselves being associated with these things. But if you're not divesting actively, if you're not working to take yourself out of these things, you're already embedded in them. It doesn't happen accidentally. I'm going to get to this next point, but before I move on, in point of question, I mean, I again want to affirm I'm not trying to share specific ideas. What I'm interested in is you engaging with me in a process of asking questions and deconstruction. In this first part, we're talking about observing. What are we learning from recent events? This is what I'm learning as I'm piecing this together. I didn't have these quotes before today. I did not have these quotes before today. What I did is witness events that are unfolding, and I looked beyond what people were telling me. I asked more questions. I'm asking you to ask more questions. John McCain's statement, again, white supremacists aren't patriots, they're traitors. Again, that's not true. How can you understand them as not patriots when they're doing the things that United States as a whole represents, that this system as a whole has invested in? They're saying, what are they saying? They're saying that they don't want to be replaced, that they want to preserve what they came with, what they've always had. They want to preserve their heritage. It's not hate, that they just want to maintain their tradition and their history. I would say that they're exceptional patriots. We're all patriots because we're investing in these systems, unless we're actively undoing that work. We are all white supremacists, we are all racists, we are all patriots, and we're all also traitors. We're all doing all of these different types of work. But when I look at these people and I see white supremacists aren't patriots, immediately what I think is actually they're probably some of the best patriots. They're fulfilling a legacy that was set up years ago, making sure that they enter these spaces. And now, what are they saying? You will not replace us. They're chanting, you will not replace us. They're chanting blood and soil. You will not replace us, blood and soil. On this land where they came. If you understand the history of the United States, then you understand the violence that occurred to remove people from this earth and to claim and to map and to colonize this space. It's not new if we look back to different pipelines that have been showing up and the conflicts that have surfaced. They're not new, but they've surfaced around these issues. This is not just the past, this is the present. People are fighting over this land endlessly, and people, it's just so interesting. It's so interesting to me to say, you will not replace us, when what you precisely did as the patriot that you are is replace others so much, so well. Replace this present so well that now you don't even identify as being a replacement. You're the one who caused the displacement, but now you're saying we will not be displaced. That's deep. It's really deep. Blood and soil too. That's how you accomplish those goals. It's so interesting to hear how these stories, how these narratives cross seas, cross generations. They pass through time, they pass across geography. I'm just observing. This is what I'm observing. So I'm going to check the chat just to be sure again. I think most people are at vigils right now, and honestly, I didn't know that there were any local vigils, or I would probably be out there too. But I also feel like it's really important to hold space for us to mindfully engage media, not just consume it in a way where it becomes integrated and all its violences become integrated, but to actively engage in a way where we deconstruct it as we're processing. So yeah, that's where I'm at with those questions and those events that I'm seeing. And another thing that I've been seeing that really, really shocks me is the statement, I just saw this earlier, is the hashtag, make racists afraid again. That is such a terrifying thing to me to hear, because what I'm hearing from that is make racists afraid to express themselves and to display what they actually feel. Make them afraid to display again. And I ask, what does that do? What does that do for the Black body? What does that do for communities that have consistently understood, because we're observing, and we're constantly observing these violences on our bodies? What does it do for these violences to be more hidden when we already know that they're present? I don't think that's what I'm noticing. That's not for Black bodies. That's not for Black life. That's not for Black Lives Matter. Who is that for when we say make racists afraid again? That's not for me. I don't need them to be afraid again. I need them to be accountable. Secondly, make racists afraid again. This othering. If I want to, here's one thing I do want to share as a point, and it can also just be a question. I want literally everyone watching this and everyone beyond, I want them to pass this question on to others and stop asking the question of, am I racist or not? Or really to stop needing validation to hear, I'm not racist. I'm going to say the same thing I just said about the white supremacist ideals. I'm invested in these systems. I personally am invested in these systems because I continue to live in a country which profits off of my body, and I affirm those systems. I'm deconstructing them now. But what I'm saying is, I understand that when the sun goes down, I'm not going to go walking around outside, because I understand what a Black body is in that context. I understand that if I choose to just go walking outside at night, that I suddenly need to have a reason to exist in that space, period. But pretty much that reason will not be accepted, and if I choose to go out there just to take a stroll, just to exist, just to do whatever I want to do without it needing to be justified, there is no justification. And when I make that choice, I need to be understanding that in this climate, it's equivalent to saying that I'm okay with my life being ended. That's the reality that I'm witnessing here. And I'm understanding that, and I'm not going outside because I understand that, and I'm invested in, I don't know, not dying, and I'm invested in it in some way. Do you hear what I'm saying? There's not a simple line between I'm racist or I'm not racist. There are so many complexities that go into how we engage in these systems, how we reaffirm them, how we give them power, how we tell them, you know what, I do deserve to be treated this way, and I do deserve to be exploited, and I do deserve to exist for your gaze. I do deserve for my body to be commodified. That's what I'm saying anytime that I affirm any of these systems, and I do it every day. I also work actively to deconstruct them. But there's a lot of ways I can't even imagine right now what it would be like to exist differently, to exist in a way where I didn't affirm these systems. So it's really just not useful, especially when looking at white folks. Stop asking this question of, are you racist? Your privilege is something. Some people are saying, I'm deconstructing my privilege. I'm checking my privilege. Maybe people used to say checking, but now they're realizing that's not enough. White folks are using their privilege every single day and affirming it and reinforcing it and allowing it to continue to exist because it benefits them. Because it benefits them, and it benefits me as someone who can identify as a United States citizen. I have a lot of privileges identifying with that. When I traveled, living in India, one of the things that I noticed most was how the supremacy of my nationalism, how much privilege it afforded me. There were so many situations in which someone would be treating me a certain way. And I don't like to speak on personal experiences, it's about systems, but I saw a pattern of systems that benefited and prioritized me when they understood my association with the United States. And sometimes I fought those, but a lot of times I just received. I'm navigating these spaces also, and I'm trying to understand, what privileges, how do I undo a privilege if I acknowledge it, if I see it, how do I deconstruct it? And there are other ways in which I have experienced so much violence that it is nice to just have something feel easier for once. My point is, I'm invested equally in white supremacy because of the work that I'm doing every day and the ways in which I don't entirely divest. And that's a reality that we are very uncomfortable with. We don't want to think of ourselves as racist. We don't want to think of ourselves as invested in systems of violence, but historically we are. And until we acknowledge that, we're not going to be able to accomplish very much because we keep othering and we don't want to see that in ourselves. Here, I'm going to take just a second and I want to share this article. I'm going to post this in the chat too. And again, this will be posted below in the description. So I'm just checking, okay. This will be posted in the description for people to engage later. But I'm looking at the rawstory.com article. So let's take a look at that. So the Raw Story article is titled, "I'm Not the Angry Racist They See. Alt-writer became viral face of hate in Virginia and now regrets it." And there are a couple quotes. So it has a picture here of this person named Peter. I do not know how to pronounce that last name, so I'm not going to. But there's a picture here of them with their mouth open, and they seem to be expressing some intense emotion, potentially anger, potentially aggression, and they're surrounded by other white folks holding these tiki torches. I just noticed they're tiki torches. I'm not going to comment on that, but anyway. There were a couple of places here. So this article, the title is, "I'm Not the Angry Racist They See." I'm not the angry racist they see. I don't know a single person who isn't saying that right now. I do not know one single person who is saying, "I am the angry racist they see." In other words, every single person that I'm engaging seems to be claiming this story of, "I'm not the angry racist. I'm not. I'm not what you're seeing. I'm not how others are perceiving me. I'm not that. I am distinct from that." Peter has a couple of quotes here. And so one of them is, I'm just going to read a couple tiny paragraphs here. Peter said, "I did not expect the photo to be shared as much as it was. I understand the photo has a very negative connotation, but I hope that the people sharing the photo are willing to listen, that I'm not the angry racist they see in that photo." And Peter adds, "As a white nationalist, I care for all people. We all deserve a future for our children and for our culture. White nationalists aren't all hateful. We just want to preserve what we have." My first response to that is how not exceptional it is, how mundane, how friendly, how reasonable, how well spoken, how articulate, how sensitive. This person feels like they've had their feelings hurt. You know, I don't want to be perceived that way. I understand that people can understand it that way. I see that, but there's something that's not being understood in this message. What's new about that? This is what everyone I see is saying. So, you know, as a white nationalist, I care for all people. That's quite a statement of compassion. I care for all people. I don't know the last time I heard someone construct that sentence, I care for all people. That sounds very intensely compassionate. We all deserve a future for our children and for our culture. In another context, I could see someone being perceived as very reasonable and you know, a positive influence. Okay, so just got a lovely comment here. I'm going to go ahead and leave that. Actually, I'm going to leave that. If you are seeing the chat, I encourage you to look at it and notice that comment, but it's also not exceptional. So Peter continues saying, white nationalists aren't all hateful. We just want to preserve what we have. My point is, doesn't this all sound in a different context? I care for all people. We all deserve a future for our children, for our culture. We just want to preserve what we have. We're not hateful. This was misunderstood. I don't want to be perceived in that way. I notice it has a very negative connotation. This all sounds extremely reasonable. And what that leads me to is the understanding that there's so much othering. There's so much this idea that, you know, I'm not the nationalist, I'm not the Nazi, I'm not the radical, I'm not the racist. Who is? That's my question. Who is? If literally no one is that racist, if literally no one is that nationalist who is full of hate, if no one is, how much can we claim this story until we have accountability? Is this somebody who lives next door to you? Is this who you used to be in high school as you were exploring yourself? Is this the person who's in your college class who made that snarky comment about black trans women? Who is this? Who is it? Who is it that is racist? Who is it that is saying, you know, I do want to be perceived as I looked in that photo. I am that angry racist. Who's going to say that? The point is, no one. No one wants to say that because no one wants to be perceived in that way. No one wants to be understood as the person who's participating in all that violence. No one wants to have to say, I have to deal with that in myself. But the fact is, you are as invested in your privilege, you are as invested in your experience and your identity, you're as invested in your job, in your career, in your future, in your children's future if you have children. You're invested in the idea of children. You're invested in laws around immigration and policing. You're invested in all of these things as much as this person is. What I don't want to do here is say this person's violence is less compelling. I'm not interested in saying, oh, this is worse or this is better, and saying, well, we're all equal. That's not what I'm saying. We're not all equal. We're all very distinct, and that's actually exactly what I'm saying. We're all distinct in these ways that allow us to feel like we're not that thing that everyone seems to not want to be. And so we're constantly doing this thing of repositioning ourselves and re-understanding ourselves and projecting towards this thing. And, you know, I'm not that thing, and I could never do this. I can't believe that. It's so, I can't believe that you have to experience that, and I hope that you're not. How can you say those things when you are the person invested in those things? You're saying, I'm not a racist. Who is? Who is going to say I'm a racist? Who is that word reserved for then? If we have the word but no one is actually identifying with it, then who is? Is anyone racist? What I see is that we all are, because of our investment in these systems and because we use our privileges pretty much always when they're offered to us, we are all unwilling to acknowledge that truth in ourselves, and we don't want to be understood that way. We have this quote from the white nationalists as repeating, "You will not replace us." And by saying the white nationalists, I mean the self-identified white nationalists, saying, "You will not replace us." From where I look in my life right now, and when I see the personal spaces, the social spaces that I'm engaging, I only see people saying, "You will not replace us." I only see people saying, "I'm not that racist." I only see people saying, "I can't believe that they're doing that to you." I only see people saying, "I can't believe that happened. How did we get here? We need to hold them accountable. We need to speak out against them." And I do not hear people saying, what is it in myself that is reinforcing these same types of violence? What is it in myself that's saying, let's make racists afraid again, instead of let's make ourselves accountable? How can we make systems accountable? This is the type of question that we're not asking, and it really disappoints me because we've been having this conversation for such a long time, and I don't understand how so few people have stopped to think and say, wait, that could be me. If I had a slightly different set of privilege experiences, if I had a slightly different set of childhood experiences, if I had slightly different parents, if I had a slightly different church group, if I had a slightly different experience with belonging in high school, and if I had a slightly different set of books that I had started reading when I was younger, if I was offered a different position at my workplace where they were paying me really well, if I didn't have to think about this on Monday, I could just do my things during the weekend, and then, you know, they won't affect me. I can exist and all that. What would it take, you know? I really don't feel that we're that far from one another in that experience, and I think that what we have to understand is that to literally all of us, the ways that we're working, when unchecked, they make sense. And we all feel that we are trying to preserve something beautiful for our futures, and to not be replaced, to not be displaced, to not be erased. And we don't want to be perceived as that thing causing all these violences. And that's really where I am with this question. As I'm observing, I'm asking, what are we learning from recent events? And I want to see this question asked. I'm tired of seeing people say, I'm not this and I'm not that. I would like to see people say, I am something. I am exceptional. To me, a black body is exceptional. A black body is exceptional. And I want us to see ourselves as something exceptional. And I want to see all of us reflecting on not the things that we're not, but the things that we are invested in, and the things that we do dream of, and the things that we do fight for, and the things that we just allow to happen passively in our day-to-day experiences, so that we don't arrive at events like what's happening in Charlottesville and say, how did we get here? Because those of us who are observing know how we got here and know that we're going to be here again until we start having more accountability. So that's what I want to share in this first space. I'm going to check the chat just to be sure. Nope, just an awesome comment from a lovely person who made sure to share their thoughts. I think we'll go ahead and close this first part, and I'm going to take about 5 minutes, and I'm going to open up the second part of this series and talk a little bit about dreaming and how do we envision what a black body is moving forward. How do we engage ourselves in a space of imagination and thriving? So that's what I'm going to come back to, and I hope that if you're watching this on as a recorded, or if you're watching it live, either way, that you'll hop on over to the second part and engage some of the questions that we're going to explore there.